Got the A6 in the garage. I'm gonna be installing some solar work coilovers on it. I'm gonna start on the driver's side here. Right in the back of this piece here, you gotta get two things out. You got your brake hose right here that has a clip that goes into, and then your ABS wire, this one here. So you're just gonna kind of wiggle it back and forth until you get it out. And then you got a plug on the other side of this, which is the white plug right here. There's also one more connector right here for the ABS. So after you get this piece out, and this, I think this is for the brake sensor. Once you get all those out, you just gotta get this one on the bottom here. That'll free up this whole wire. Your brake hose should have some movement to it, because we're gonna take this bolt out, take these ball joints out, and lean this forward. So you don't want the brake line to be having like tension on it and being pulled, because you can damage it. So take the brake caliper off. You have a T45, I believe it is, right there. And you'll be able to pop there's a spring clip and a cover. And then around the back side, there's a Allen on the bottom and on the top. There's two plastic covers that go on there. So you gotta pop them off, and there's two 9mm Allens they have to take off as well. Along with this little connector here, which just twists, and then you just gotta wiggle it out and get it loose. Just like that. So now this is free. So we're gonna take that off, take the 9mm off the back, and then once this is off, we can swing this farther forward without having to worry about the brake hose. All right, so now you gotta take this top bolt out. It's a 16 on both sides, and this bolt goes all the way through this entire piece. So I'm gonna take that out, and then you gotta get these two ball joints out at the top. Just to make this a little easier to get the bolt out, once you have the nut off, you can put the gun on this side and sometimes just spin it to break any like corrosion off. And then if it doesn't want to come out, you can take your wrench, press on the back side of it and spin it, and it'll push it right out. And then once you get it to here, take this side of the wrench, put it on here and push back, and you can get it pretty much most of the way out. So then you have a little slot here. Take a chisel and a hammer, tap it into the slot. You don't want to go hard because you can crack the aluminum. So once you have the chisel in there, take an air hammer with like a flatter or round bit on the top, and you can put it on the back side of the ball joint. So down here on the lower control arm, I forgot to mention this, there is a 10mm nut that connects your headlight level sensor. Not all cars will have this, but mine's equipped with it. So I gotta pull that out because I don't want to be putting tension on the sensor and break it. Got both of these off. Just use the impact gun on the bottoms to push them up through. So this is all loose now, and everything's swung over to the side. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the lower strut bolt, which goes right here. And there's a nut on the other side, which is this one here. So now we're gonna do the same thing we did with the other bolt. Put the gun on this side of it, spin it loose, and we'll spin that bolt all the way out. What I like to do is put the nut and the bolt you just took out, just thread it on so you don't mix up what nuts go on what bolts. So
state the obvious.
That lower bolt, the lower bolt's out now. Now you gotta get two more of these out. The brake hose has another clip and that wire has another clip. Pull them out, and then you have to get this bolt here that holds the sway bar end link. And then you got 4 bolts up top and it should come out. I think I'm just gonna take this bolt out of right here because this is gonna kind of be a pain in the ass to get over this lower control arm and then wiggle it out. So I'm gonna try and take this off here, drop it down, and then take the strut out the side here. So once you get this in that slot, just tap it with a hammer. You can kind of just wiggle this down without even using like an air hammer or anything. And it's just touching the control arm. So let's see if we can't push it down a little farther. I'm gonna tap it back in, it came out. You can hit that one a little harder and spread it a little farther because this is steel, so it's more forgiving. If it's aluminum, you don't want to go as hard because you can crack it. So that should be enough. We're gonna go up top and get the 4 bolts from up top, and then we should be able to drop this right down. So now up top here, we got 4 13mm bolts, and that should allow the strut to drop out from the bottom. So before you take the last one out, you're gonna wanna reach under here and hold the strut as you take this bolt out so it doesn't just drop. Once you have all those bolts out, you wanna get the strut over this lower piece, which you might have to tap the chisel back into. So, you can wiggle it, put this to the side, and that's it, it's out. All right, so now we got the strut on the bench. So everything we did on the driver's side, you can repeat on the passenger side to get the strut out. I'm not gonna bother filming it because it's just gonna be very repetitive. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the spring compressors out, and we're gonna compress the spring so I can get this upper mount off and transfer that to this strut here, because this strut didn't come with upper mounts. You can just buy new upper mounts, and you wouldn't need a spring compressor for these because you can thread these down far enough to the point where you'd just be able to get the mount on and the spring wouldn't be in the way. But there's nothing wrong with these mounts. This car only has 40,000 on it, so I'm just going to reuse them instead of spending the extra money. So let's get the spring compressors on there and I'll show you how that's done. So this is the spring compressor tool. It basically just grabs 2 parts on the spring, and you got a big bolt that goes through them, and as you thread it in, it squeezes the spring together and it's going to take tension off of this. Alright, so once you get your spring compressors on, don't tighten them, just leave them on the way they are, just get them like snug with your hand. And in here is a 19. You're going to want to break it loose with a gun, whatever you got to do. You're not going to take it off fully, but you just want to get it past the nylon locking piece in there, because if you don't, once the spring is compressed and there's no tension on this, the strut is just going to spin. It's going to be hard to get out. So like I said, you want to take it just till it reaches the end of the nylon in there. You don't want to go past that, because if you go past that, this thing's going to shoot off and you're going to get hurt. But now that we're at this point, we're going to tighten up the spring and then come back and take this off. You don't ever want to go fully on one side and just a little bit on the other side. You want to work it evenly so the spring compresses evenly. So it should be good. Flip it back around, put this in here, pop that off. So this is your rubber upper mount, the nut, upper mount. Then we got this got to come off. And then the coilovers I bought come with a bump stop and the little cup thing, so we're not going to need this. We'll just throw that back on there. So that's that. Now to take these off, you want to do the same thing. You don't want to just send one side off and leave one side tight. You're going to work it back and forth, same way we went when putting them on. So we have everything we need off this. We'll set this to the side. We don't need this anymore. So now we're going to focus on coilover. Now the easiest thing to do is take all your stuff off. And what you're going to do is you're going to spin these locking rings all the way down. Now once that's all the way down, helper spring goes first. Put it on exactly the way they had it. But now, see there's all this room up top. And we can put this back on, which you have a little knob here, and that is gonna go on the end of the spring right here. You wanna make sure that lines up. So stick this on, that's where that goes. Then you got your rubber and your bolt, or nut, you have your nut. So now it's all assembled, but as you can see, this has plenty of room in it. And the reason for that was now we can just spin this and it'll put pressure against the spring. There's no need for spring compressors when you're using these. So now, to make our life easier, we're gonna tighten this up. And while you're tightening it down, you wanna make sure your spring is pushed up against this little stop here. That's where the spring's meant to sit. As you can see, this rubber curves with the spring and the spring touches it completely. So that's the point of it being there. So you just wanna keep tightening this down, and that's gonna put compression. This is gonna put compression on that upper mount. So when we go to tighten it down, it'll have tension, just like when we took it off, how we wanted to have tension. That's what this is gonna do. So now that we have some tension on here, we're gonna tighten this up. That's nice and tight. And that is your fully assembled coilover. So now once it's in the car, obviously you're gonna adjust these up and down for your ride height. So I'll make a few notes on how to put it in, but it's really just gonna be the same exact as how you're taking it apart. I'll show putting it in and getting that collar back on it. And then after that, I'm sure you guys will be able to figure out the rest. So in the kit that I got this waterproof lubricant and rust protection. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of it on the threads. A little up here. Nothing crazy, so I'm just gonna do that, and then I'm gonna thread these up. I'm gonna start with just when I tighten this up, I'm just gonna put a little bit of tension on it just to hold it all together. And that's what's gonna be my starting point. This kit advertises that it can lower it from 1 inch to 3 inches, and I measured, I have about 3 inches of wheel gap. So I wanna start from the lowest point and work higher if I have to. So like I said, we're gonna put a little bit of tension on it and leave it just like that, and we'll do the same on the other side. Drop the front on the ground and see how it looks. So that is with pretty much the least amount of tension. It touched the spring and I turned it maybe 4 or 5 more times, but just to make sure we get the other side exactly the same, I'm gonna measure from here to the bottom of the strut. That way we can match up the other side. Obviously it's not gonna be 100% until we level the car, but this is just to get it pretty close so I don't have one side higher than the other when I'm starting to level the car and seeing if I have to go lower or higher. All right, so now we're gonna put the strut in from the front side here. Top of this isn't exactly square. 2 bolts are skinnier, 2 bolts are wider. The two that are closer together face outward towards you. So get this up. So once you get this in, you're gonna wanna push this up through those holes, and you're gonna have to hold it and then go up top and get your nut started. So once you hold that up and get one caught, you can just get one, you can let go. You wanna get your other started, and you wanna tighten, you know, this one, then this one. You don't wanna just go in a circle. Try to cross everything. So first we're gonna tighten this up from up top. Then we're gonna put this bottom piece on, which obviously you can see it's not touching like it wasn't when we took them out. But these coilovers are shorter because it's meant to lower the car. All right, so you don't want to keep your chisel in here, and you should be able to just get this on. Same way you took it off, and it goes all the way up until it stops. There's a little bump right here that hits the bottom of the coilover, so you want to put it all the way in until it stops, and then tighten that bolt down. Doesn't matter if you have the angle 100% correct, because this turns back and forth, so you don't have to worry about that. So once you get this first one in, it makes it easier to put this bolt halfway so that can't come back out. Then get the second one in, and then push the bolt all the way through. So we're gonna start with the rear now. First thing you wanna do is take this upper mount off. It is 2 16 bolts here and here. And then there's one lower bolt, which think it's a 21. I don't know. But first we're gonna take this out. That way it'll let this drop down a little farther and get as much tension as we can off of the spring. And then, I don't know, we're gonna see if we can get the spring compressors in there. If not, let's figure something else out. So that's what we're gonna go with for now. Just try drop this, let it hang a little lower and be able to get this spring out. So I got the spring compressors kind of where I think I'm gonna put them. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pop this brake caliper off because it's pretty big on the backside here. And my plan right now is to compress the spring, lean it towards me, and then pull it out like this way. So hopefully we can accomplish that by taking the caliper off. It's 2 13s on the backside here. And I dropped these 2 bolts, but it didn't really, I mean, maybe it dropped down, if anything, 1/4 of an inch, so it really doesn't do much, but it's something. So we're gonna pop this off, hang it to the side. We're gonna compress these, and then hopefully we'll be able to sneak it out from right here. So I got the caliper swung to the side. Now we're just gonna tighten these spring compressors down, and hopefully we can just sneak it right out the side here. Alright, so I got the spring out. I ended up, once I had it loose, I actually ended up coming out from here, bringing it down. I would still suggest taking the caliper off and swinging it to the side. It gives you a lot more access in there. And then you can see I have a crowbar. That goes into this lower control arm. So when I pull down on it, it pulls this whole assembly down, and I had my dad hold it down while I took the spring out. The spring has a lot of tension on it. This spring was about half the size it is now with like the compressors on it. I had to unscrew the compressors almost all the way to the end just to get them off. And when I had them on there, they were like practically touching. So this is the lowering spring compared to the old spring. So it's got quite a, probably like 6 inches on it. So once you get to this point, I would suggest taking the strut out now, just because less shit in your way to do it. So we're gonna do that next, and then we'll get to swapping over the strut mount, or the shock mount, and getting the spring back in. Once you have the strut out, this nut is usually pretty hard to get off. So if you take a towel and fold it up, and you can put a pair of vice grips on it to prevent the strut from like just freely spinning. Because if not, once this, maybe if it breaks loose, if anything, it's just gonna start spinning. It's gonna have no control over it. So you put these in there, make sure you fold up the towel nice and thick. This thing's folded up all the way, so the teeth don't mark up the strut. Test it. I mean, first, you have to use it on your old struts first, but make sure you test it, make sure it's not super tight, make sure it leaves no marks, because if you leave marks, it'll tear the seals inside of this. So, this, I believe, is a 16. See? Comes right out with that held on there. And then you just pop this upper mount off. There's nothing special in this one. You just slide it right onto your new one. And you're going to do the same thing. You're going to put the towel, the vice grip, clamp it, and then you're going to tighten this down. And that's a 16, the nut in there. But the one that comes with this kit, depending on what kit you buy, it could be different. This one is an 18. The new nut is a little bit bigger. So, alright, so this is your lower spring mount. This you're going to reuse. The lowering spring that comes with the kit will fit right on here. It's the same deal as the front. It has a little notch down there that the spring, the last coil of the spring fits into. And then on the top, you have this piece here. This is your adjuster. It's threaded. It's got your spanner wrench nut on it. That sits in there like that. And then you have a little plastic washer to insulate the, so it's not metal to metal, doesn't make any like clanking noises when you're hitting bumps. So this all goes in as one piece. That's how it goes. I'll move over to the car right now. It's really easy to get in. The factory springs are hard to get out. You have to really compress them and wiggle them out. I had to end up putting a pry bar in the lower control arm and pulling the entire like rotor and the whole assembly down to get me more room. But when you go to put these in, they will literally just fit right in, and you'll have to end up adjusting this higher for it to catch the hole and not be too low. Another thing to note, the factory upper mount, you do not reuse this. You can toss this to the side. The puck here, up there is a hole, which this pin here fits right into, and that's how that goes on, and then your spring goes under it, obviously. So I got the whole strut in, the adjuster. I'm gonna just adjust it to the same, I'm gonna adjust this down to the same size as the other side, and then I have to put the car on the ground and see how high and low it has to go. I have to readjust the fronts. The fronts are a little too low. We'll do all that tomorrow, fully level out the car. But everything's installed now. I just gotta throw the wheel back on and set it down. All right, so I'm filming this probably like a week after I installed the coilovers. As you can see, I'm back on stock wheels. Had an issue with clearance with the tires that I had on the wheels. I bought them used, so they came with the tires on them. They were 20x10 Rohanas with Michelin Pilot Sport 275 35x20. So what I ended up doing was buying two 65 30/20s, but they're still on the way. So I've just been driving around the stocks, and it rides absolutely beautiful. You'd never know that this car was lowered probably about 3 inches. At this point it's at right now, it's about as low as it can get. I might have to raise it up a little bit when I put the Rohanas on, just because right now you can see even with these 18s, the tires kind of tucking a little bit. But I'll adjust it once I get the tires in and all that. But it rides almost close to factory. It's a really, really nice ride quality, and I definitely would recommend it. It was easy to install. Everything was what they said it was, and it rides absolutely great. And it looks nice too.